So I'm Rachel CK of the Breast Cancer Conversations, and I have actually had a women's wellbeing business called Essentially Rachel UK for almost 10 years now, but the Breast Cancer Conversations came about 4.5 years ago, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about why. I was already making shifts into the natural world, let's say, as I wanted to support my own well-being, pretty much from about 10 years ago when my son was born, when I had quite a lot of issues, mostly stemmed around his well-being and his sleep. And I needed to find support for myself and support for him, and I wasn't that ready for the first step to be all medication. And this comes with the caveat that I am not at all anti-medication. I believe every medication has its place. But my map of the world is very much around combining the two, and that started as being part of my world around 10 years ago. So let me just dive in and tell you a little bit more about me. So I am a breast cancer thriver and survivor. I am very passionate about changing the narrative around breast cancer care, especially when we put the word integrative at the beginning of it, meaning that we can support ourselves whilst choosing, being the operative word, the treatment that we want to have. And what I found through my own experience was that the choosing wasn't necessarily that easy if you weren't told of the choices that we have. I am a specialist in essential oils. I have worked solely with essential oils with many women for that 10 years. That was my business, Essentially Rachel UK. But I pivoted my business about 4 years ago after coming through my breast cancer experience and journey, and knowing that I wanted to be able to help other women in a similar way. That said, although I work specifically with women and with breast cancer, that doesn't mean the things that I'm sharing don't also include the men in the room or the men in your world. From a well-being, from a human perspective, we're talking about humans and humans at a cellular level. So everyone's welcome. And I just needed to specialize in a place where I wasn't completely burnt out and where I wasn't repeating the way that I'd lived my life before and trying to help everybody. So that doesn't mean that anything I share today isn't here to support not just you, not just the men present, you're very welcome, but also those around you as well. I am an accredited supporter and provider of training in integrative cancer care. And I also have a number of programs that I also deliver one-to-one that are also accredited programs, whether you're in phase 1, 2, or 3. And phase 1 being from the moment of diagnosis up to the end of treatment. Phase 2 being that place that we may find ourselves. Some of you may be there already, some of you may not. When treatment ends, the air can feel like treacle and like we don't know who we are anymore. Phase 2. And then phase 3 being living beyond the shadow of the journey and the experience, that living beyond the shadow of not living every day in fear, and where every twinge is another process through the system, and being terrified of what those results might be. So phase 3 is kind of living with a bit more calm and a bit more confidence. So that's me in a nutshell. Feel free to ask any more about that I don't like to go on about it. So anything that you feel I haven't covered, please ask me later. This is my mantra. This is a mantra that I live by and have lived by actually a long time. However, this really came into play, not just when my son was struggling to sleep and was struggling with digestive systems, and I then had horrendous anxiety, lots and lots of things happening prior to my breast cancer diagnosis. This is something that I live by and that I share a lot, which is the empowered choices equals empowered living. And that is regardless of where you put your boat in the water. That is regardless of where you're at on your health journey, regardless of whether you have embraced anything natural or not, and also regardless of whether you choose not to have it. The thing that I'm very passionate about for you and for anyone in your world, you can only make empowered choices if you actually know what the choices are. So I like to open a few boxes and to share things that you may already know about, but actually this is going to be something that helps you think, yes, that's something I'm doing and I feel really good about that and feel empowered in that. You might make an empowered choice, which is, this is a load of rubbish, Rachel, I'm not listening and I'm really happy with what I'm doing. I'm happy with either. I love people making empowered decisions for themselves, a really, really great, strong yes or no. And it doesn't have to be yes in my direction. But what I'm going to be sharing with you today is what happened to me. And what I'm going to share with you today are the choices that I was determined to dig up and unearth when I felt like there were some things that I wasn't being shown or wasn't being told about, or actually things that I was being told weren't for me, but that my gut instinct told me wasn't quite right. So what I'm showing you is what I did to get from my cancer diagnosis to here. And some of that might sit well with you. Some of that might feel a bit inspiring. Some of it might feel a bit challenging. And I just want you to know that's okay. There's no judgment here. There's no images of perfection. This is what I did. And some people find this quite interesting and might want to tap into some of the things that I did to support myself. And that's perfectly okay. It's all welcome and all opinions are welcome as well. So a little introduction to me. In 2018, when this picture was taken, I was a mummy to a 5-year-old and a wife. I was a passionate swimmer, as I have been all of my life, a surfer, a creative, a lover of music, all things that are still part of my world. I was really passionate about plant power and our ability to advocate for our own well-being. I was already by that point, my business was 5 years old, and I was empowering women to prioritize self-care and natural solutions. That still includes the guys, just so you know, because that also has an influence with every woman I've worked with, every way that they take on doing something that feels good for them. Their partners benefited, husbands benefited, children benefited, brothers, dads, whatever, because when that woman felt better about herself and actually then started talking about it and sharing it, it raises the vibe in the whole house and it raises the vibe in the conversations they're having. I don't see this as exclusive to just women. It's mostly women that approach me for support, and I'm here for it. Okay, who I also was before that. I was burnt out. I was career driven. I was really struggling with panic attacks. I was burning the candle at both ends. I was pushing down every single emotion in the doing and the just needing to get things done. I didn't understand that I even had an off button, never mind to actually press it. I was surrounded by people telling me, wow, you do so much. And I plastered a smile on, like at my 40th birthday, with a picture with my baby there. I was really, really struggling, but I was brilliant at plastering the smile on and making everything okay for everybody else. And then I just followed suit. I also was an ex-smoker. And I did use drink as a crutch, as many of us do. And I had IVF. And the reason I'm sharing all of those things with you is that each of those things were things that led towards my diagnosis. I don't believe that cancer diagnoses come out of nowhere. And I'm hoping that's not too uncomfortable for anyone listening. But we may end up needing to have those conversations. That's why I'm here to have the cancer conversations. One of the biggest and most empowering moments in my life after my diagnosis was finding all the threads as to how did I get here. I was on the surface incredibly fit and incredibly active and well, apart from just have panic attacks every now and again. That's okay. And the way I'm going to get over all the stress of my life is I'm going to share a really beautiful bottle of Rioja with my husband, and maybe we have one each. All of those things covering up everything going on underneath led me to well, actually at the time wasn't the shock of my life, because many of the women in my family have been affected by breast cancer, so it shouldn't have come as a surprise. What came as a surprise were the genetic test that told me and showed us all there was no connection. So I then had a really bitter pill to swallow, which was either it was going to be genetics and I could blame it on that, which meant I'm then really disempowered and I feel like there's nothing I can possibly do, which somebody actually told me, or it's not genetically connected. Even with epigenetics, we can still have an impact. Even if there is a genetic result, you can still change that, just by the way. But then I also had it's not genetics. So the way that I have lived my life and the way that I have felt, the way that I have misjudged and misguided myself into some of the things I thought I was doing all right by actually didn't do me so well. I wanted to understand how I got here. And for me, mentally, understanding that and being able to take some, if not all, responsibility for it is what then helped me understand that I could turn the ship. That felt like Titanic. It felt like Titanic, as things do when you hear those words that you have cancer and you feel like your world ends. The most powerful thing that anybody said to me right at the start was my oncologist. My oncologist said the most powerful thing. And the thing that he said to me with a girlfriend wag of his finger like this: there is nothing that you can possibly do about this situation. It was in one sentence, the most disarming, disempowering thing he could have ever said. However, it's fueled me for the last 5 years to know that that was utter BS and that was lies, because there is no way that anybody has the right to disempower you in that way and let you know there is nothing you can possibly do. Even just turning up for treatment is something you can do. But that one sentence not only got his ass fired, but that one sentence was the thing that drove me even further into all of the research and all of the programs and all of the training and all of the books to know I already know that I can do something about this, because I've been looking after my entire family's health and well-being for the last 5 years, and we haven't needed anything else. We've just needed some of these amazing things that we have at our fingertips. So I knew already that there was something here that was really off. And also something that I already had a glimmer of in this natural world I was living in that was really right. I have no issues with the NHS. They absolutely have their place. I possibly wouldn't be here without them, but I possibly wouldn't be here without everything else. And my son wouldn't be here. So I have no axe to grind. What I do really understand and appreciate is that the modern medication has its place and its time. And most of the people that I know that are working in there are doing their absolute best, have dedicated their lives their lives to helping us and helping ours. However, there's a bit of a gap, and the gap is the integrative oncology area and the integrative living and integrative support, and also the being able to advocate for yourself without it feeling like a battle. Because when we look at that through the lens of the cancer conversations, any battle, anything inflammatory is actually not doing us any good anyway. Everything needs to come with ease and grace without knowing that you're already dreading an appointment because you're going to be at loggerheads with the person you're going to see, which is where you get to switch the person and you get to build your A team. One of the first things I do with my clients is who's in your A team. If we're surrounded by negative Nellies, they may need to exit stage left. If we've got amazing friends and family around us that are there to be able to help and support, they get to stay. But it includes your medical team. And one of the most, the biggest lessons, I had a friend that actually had worked high up in the NHS, and it was a conversation with her where she'd actually let me know, you can choose. What do you mean you can choose? I'd already fired my oncologist. I knew I was never ever going back in a room with him. But then I could start ringing around and phoning. I can phone people. I can choose who I spend the next however long providing my care. Yeah, you can. You can choose. So we don't all get on with everybody. There are conflicts of interest. There are conflicts of personalities. And I can't tell you how many people in the cancer world that I've met that have just put up with somebody that actually just wasn't a nice person. It's not a judgment on them, the work they do, or the fact that they prescribe stuff. They just weren't a nice person. Why would you want to spend some of your most vulnerable times with somebody who just isn't nice? You change. So this is also who I became. After all of that, somebody with a breast cancer diagnosis, heartbroken mum, and someone that was absolutely determined to find all the ways, the gold standard of everything that was available, and to implement that into my life, no matter what. And I hadn't realised until quite recently, when I was having a conversation with somebody that's quite high up in the natural cancer world, on a live they were doing, that was talking about some of the things I'm going to talk to you about. When I said, well, I've done a few of these things, and he was absolutely blown away. I don't want this to feel hard for anybody. It takes a bit of time to implement a number of things. But what I do know, and in our human nature, is that if we want it enough, we'll do it. If we need to move mountains to achieve something, we'll do it. And we have that within us to do. Also helps having an amazing A team around you. So I never want you to underestimate the power of community, and which is what's so beautiful about here, where we are right now, and that there are many communities like this. And I'm so glad that you found this one, and to stay connected to it, because places like this and this place, there are going to be times, if there haven't been already, that feel really tough, and you need someone to talk to that understands it and gets it, and you're going to find them right here. So I'm so glad that you've got it. So we're going to talk about today my map of the world, because it isn't everybody's, and that's okay. What Rachel did next, and phase 2 and 3. We're going to have a little look at those as well. So day 1, phase 1 for me, this was the first thing that happened. My brother, who's amazing, a bit of a biohacker, I have a conversation with him that is in the midst of the world ending my first 48 hours, which felt like a lifetime. But honestly, looking back, knowing it was only 48 hours, I was really lucky. I already had a bit of a head start on supporting myself and dealing with anxiety and dealing with sleep and using natural things to help that. My brother sent me these 2 things. I didn't thank him at the time. The first one there, the book, Tripping Over the Truth, is this thick. And that podcast with Dominic D'Agostino was 3 hours long. You know, this was my entry level into the world of cancer. I had spent my life avoiding it, everything about it, because of my family history and fear, terror. So I started, this was my day 1. I started with this book and I started with this podcast, and they created a change and a shift in me that I don't know if I'll ever experience again. But it was, I can't even really explain it. It was a moment, and I remember that moment of listening and going and understanding. I needed to understand the metabolic theory of cancer. I needed to understand how ketogenics in your body, how ketones work. I needed to understand how oxygen therapy worked, and I needed to understand how fasting worked, because if I was to have chemotherapy, they exacerbate the benefits. Now, all of a sudden, I'm in a world that I don't know, that I'm not familiar with, but I know that I'm diving in further. And I went and I got lost in a good way in all of this. I don't want people to get lost in it, so I kind of truncate it down and let people know a bit more about it. So this was where it started. What I needed to really understand, and I want everybody to understand, whether in a cancer journey, whether at one end, whether at the beginning, no matter what phase you're in, is to what it's in. And do you know the most powerful thing that I learned? Everybody's body is creating what we call cancer all the time. All the time. That our bodies are, this is how I explain it. This is my layman's term of explaining it. Our bodies are creating these things all the time. And if you imagine a nightclub, okay, so you imagine a nightclub where there are bouncers, and there's somebody creating a bit of a rumpus in one of the rooms in the nightclub, and the bouncers go and surround them and march them off the premises. This is how my brain needed to work then, because don't forget, as I'm sure many of you understand, when we get anxious and when we panic, our ways of our brains taking in information don't work quite so well. And also information falls out, as happens to me regularly, hence needing all the notes because I can't remember all this. So we're in a nightclub, we've got bouncers, and then something else happens over here in the bouncers. Then we're a bit thin on the ground now because some have already gone that way, taking some other troublemakers out. That's your body, or the bouncers coming and surrounding some other troublemakers, surrounding them, taking them off the premises. And then some little shits in the corner light a fire. I want you to think about this as your body, and the bouncers are your immune system. Everybody's body has the bouncers and has the troublemakers. Everybody's body. However, we go about our day-to-day life with a heightened immune system. Everything's going fine. Everything's running relatively smoothly in most people. These things happen. Apoptosis of cells isn't happening. The cells aren't dying off. They're the troublemakers. And the bouncers in our body, our immune system, surround them, march them off the premises. You only know about it when the bouncers get a bit thin on the ground. And you know about it when the bouncers are already thin on the ground. You think about the stress of day-to-day life, other conditions maybe that we have that are putting our immune system under stress, and all of the distractions, maybe not eating great food, maybe drinking too much, maybe smoking. What was I doing? I don't know, but I did it. I own up to it. Wasn't my greatest choice in leaving home and doing all the things I was told I shouldn't. So your immune system gets spread too thin on the ground. There aren't enough available. Also, that while they're all distracted and the little beats in the corner have lit a fire, it's something big and it's something that spreads. And there aren't enough on the ground. That's how I like to see it and think of it. I'm very visual. I am always employing new bouncers and training my bouncers. That's how I see what I do and the way that I live. I want more bouncers. I want the best bouncers there are. I want more of them. I want more bouncers than I want anything else. Then there can never be troublemakers. But now I actually have something. I have more bouncers at the door, so the troublemakers can't even make it in. And I don't give anybody matches. No matches allowed. Every day of my life while I'm living the things that I eat, the way I live, the way that I live, the way I support. I have even more anxiety now in medical menopause, but all of the ways that I live and the things that I do, whether it's what I'm eating, what I'm exposing myself to, the fact that I don't have the news on ever. I work supporting people another way. I don't read inflammatory things. I don't watch inflammatory things. I work with my emotions to try to keep me somewhere in the bottom half of anxiety, because all of that is torching what's going on in your world and creating inflammation, and that's where we get a problem. So this is also not where we lay blame in understanding how did we get here. My understanding how I got to my cancer diagnosis, if I then just sat blaming myself constantly, actually things would have just got worse. It doesn't do anybody any good. Taking, and this is language that you may hear in different places that you are, radical responsibility. Radical responsibility is a bitter, bitter pill to swallow of going, you mean I could have had something to do with it? It's not easy. And it's not always all the story. We're all complicated beings. But what I wanted to know was, what did I create, or what in the ways that I was living, what wasn't serving me? Because then I can undo it. Then I can change. Then I can make lifestyle choices. Then I can change what I'm eating or what I'm drinking. Then I can go up another level. Then I can be green cleaning and making sure there are no toxins in my house. If we aren't able to be open to how did I get here, then it makes it harder to make any shifts and change, so that we can actually be empowered from here on in, from the moment of diagnosis, from there on in, of being able to do things that support you alongside any other support you're getting, any other medical interventions that there are. The biggest part of this conversation is hope. The biggest part of this conversation is that part inside of you that is also energy, that is hope. That as that grows when we feel empowered. If you think of something that makes you feel really good, a sense of achievement, you feel good. There are hormones released in your body. All of those will feel higher good. None of those are actually creating you emotions or creating things inside you that make you feel worse. And the better you feel and the more able you feel to do something, the more hope you feel, the more likely you are to make the next step and the next shift into supporting yourself at a cellular level, which is what we're doing, whether we're supporting our emotions, supporting our physical body, or supporting our energy. We can begin to take on some responsibility for our own version of what happens next, accepting what went before, and then healing can start happening. So this is my map of the world. So my map of the world are our three bodies, the three bodies that you're made up of. And that is the physical body, the emotional body, and the energetic body. And all of these make up the glorious being that is you. And that glorious being, having had something that has gone awry, that has been incredibly traumatic, that means you have or you are going through treatment that creates lots of challenges, that maybe you're on the other side of all that treatment that is still creating daily challenges. But if you're made up of all of these three things, and you can understand these three things and what goes into making you you, You can also look at where are the things that I could maybe make small tweaks and small changes to know I'm doing the best I can to help me. What comes with this sense and what comes with these changes are not only fanning that flame and your energy rising from being in your boots, it's also the understanding that you don't have to wait either for a medication or for a person or for an appointment for you to shift the state that you're in, that emotional state that you're in, or where your energy is at. Whether you're in a really low mood and not feeling great, that only is lengthened by waiting for somebody else and always outsourcing how you can feel about you and what you're doing. So if you were to take on, right, well, I'll just start with what I eat and drink, you must do that umpteen times a day. That's that many times a day that you can feel a bit better about what you're doing. Going, well, I'm just going to have this. It might be a cup of tea with less sugar in. It might be a cup of tea with no milk in, if that feels better for you. It might be I've switched to herbal teas and that feels really good. I'm just drinking more water. It can be teeny tiny things. It can be massive things like I'm going keto, which is a massive lifestyle shift. It doesn't really matter what it is. What matters is that it's one step up for your mood and one step up for you, feeling I feel a bit calmer and a bit more confident today because I know I can do some things for me. So there are physical ways that we can support ourselves, the emotional ways, looking at our stress, how on earth we cope with all of that, our thoughts, our beliefs, the constant negative thought processes going around in our mind, and how do I get to shift them? How do I get out of it? How do I get out of that downward spiral? Is there somebody I can reach out to? Is there a gathering happening somewhere within this community that I can go and just say, I'm not having a great day? And then from an energetic perspective, your system is made up of energy centers, of your chakras. These matter. These matter when all of this works together and things get clogged up and things get congested. To actually work with somebody and be open to understanding more if you don't know a lot about it already, thinking about your energy, your experiences impact your energy, your beliefs impact your energy, your environment impacts your energy. We all know when you walk into a room and someone's had a big bust up, we know that the energy in the room is different to walking in the room and everything being fine. Make sense? And energy being a thing, you know when you feel in a really bad mood, your energy is lower. You know when you feel like you don't have a care in the world, on some of those good days, your energy is higher. It's a thing, and it isn't woo. It's science. And the person that said energy is everything was the ultimate mad scientist, right? You know, you can't get any better than that. So I want you to be really open to understanding about how energy also works within you, within your body, and all of this works together and it makes you you. Okay. This was my map of the world of understanding these three things and figuring out, okay, how do I create a filtration system for all of this where I can fit it into my life whilst my husband works away and I have a 5-year-old who needs the school run and all of the things. So this was what I did next. The first thing was I worked with my reticular activation system. Now, you might not know what that is, but you do. If I say yellow car and then I send you to look out of your window, you're only really going to notice the yellow cars. You'll know that. You can do it, practice it any time. You think of something, that's a thing you'll notice. It's a really fantastic way the human brain works. And actually, it's used a lot in coaching. I like to use it in this. That when we have something going on for us and we're not feeling quite so well about it, we're not feeling great, or energy's quite low, is you create and surround yourself with all the good things. The first thing for me was to find thrivers, was to find those people that had either lived and gone through an integrative route or a natural route, and find the people that I could have in front of me as often as possible and their books, so that my brain was totally honed in on all the good stuff, being how this can work, rather than keep looking at, keep seeing, or spending time reading or watching things about people for whom the outcome was not so great. And actually, when you're in the cancer world, that's kind of unavoidable as well. But I needed to make sure that everything on my phone, on the telly, things I was reading, things I was watching, was everything about it was generally green. I turned my world green. Finding options and what was possible was really important. Finding options of, okay, so this is what you're telling me, but what else is there? And that was generally my take on everything. So this is what you're telling me, but what else is there? And if my medical team weren't prepared to tell me what options there were, then I was absolutely in my right, and I did, and I went and found what other things are possible. It didn't mean I wasn't going to come back and choose their thing or their proposed drug or their proposed treatment. I needed to know my options. This is where empowered choices come from. And my one feeling about how cancer support rolls out purely from the medical community is that it's all a bit fast, so that you don't get off the conveyor belt and just take a minute and have a look at what my options are, and then choose to jump back on if you want and pull other things into support, which is essentially what I did. So finding your A team, that choosing who's around you, finding what to do when, because timing is everything. And then, unfortunately, some of this, what I was doing was making hard and very lonely choices, because not one person around me had either been through this or was open to the things that I was looking into. They thought I was nuts because they also didn't have any other knowledge, experience of somebody wanting to go down integrative route, because actually we're pushed away as though it doesn't exist, as though that way of living and supporting yourself doesn't work. Well, it does. So sometimes only we can make those choices, only we can make those decisions, and actually being able to tap into that inner guidance system and knowing what is right for you is so important, and not only doing things because you're told to. Some of us will do that because that's in our upbringing and that's in our experiences. You don't question it, and that's okay. But if ever there's a question pops up of, actually, this feels, I'm not sure about this, that's a no. Maybe is a no until it's a yes. So making those choices and trusting your gut, I cannot tell you enough, trusting your gut. It's usually right, and it usually is right in the ways of, I need to find another option to know that this is the right option. It also works that way. It's not just always about going contrary to what's being offered. So my number 7. So I was asked once to put all of this in a book, and it was like, well, there'd just be 7, there'd just be these chapters, and this is how it would work. And at that point was when I counted all the things that I was doing, and there were 7. And then what I realized as well, that there were generally 7 hours in my day when I could take action. There were 7 ways, 7 hours in the 7 days in the week, the 7 ways to scaffold myself. All of that is what became 7 columns of cancer care, 7 columns of support. And these are my 7. Essential oils and supplements, because that was where I started. That was how I lived already, and juicing as well. Oxygen therapy. I'm going to dive in a little bit to each of these to explain a bit more. The whole nutrition conversation, there are so many. The one I chose was keto, but it was keto for cancer, not keto for fashion, and not keto that's all over Pinterest. There's a difference. And fasting. Emotional support, understanding how to deal with the past, including energy work, including having that support for my figuring out how I got there and what I was going to do about it. And actually all the emotions that brought up, nobody said this was easy. Chemotherapy, I did end up choosing to have chemotherapy. Juicing and surgery. The one thing that I will say, that of all of those on the list, the chemotherapy and the surgery are probably the most commonly understood and known for how we support a body that has created cancer. Everything else on that list helped me recover really quickly, helped me bounce back really quickly, and helped me heal really quickly. All of those other things were actually in support of increasing the efficacy of chemotherapy and ensuring that I bounced back, and also ensuring I wasn't hospitalized in between each treatment, which until the end I didn't know was a thing. And there are others. There are other ways of naturally supporting, integratively supporting somebody going through a cancer journey. These are the ones that I chose. And there were others, but I chose these because they felt right. And I also couldn't fit anything else in my day. I was still running a business and looking after my son. So these are what are right for me. It doesn't mean that there aren't others. Now, I'm going to flick back and two between these 2 slides, because what I've found before, I've done this talk before, and if I do a slide per one of these, by the 7th one, everyone is completely overwhelmed and feels like that's impossible. But it isn't. I know if I can fit it on 2 slides, it's doable. Well, I know it's doable because I did it, and many of my clients have done it as well. But here we go. Look, 7 columns. That's it. This is what I did. Not impossible. Not all of it needs to be done all together right now. I did because that was how I felt. I knew I was going to get through and keep myself sane, which I think is half of the battle. So we're going to go through these 7. Please feel free to ask questions at the end about any of these. The first thing I was doing was using my oils and supplements. I was already using oils predominantly for my sleep and anxiety. The number one thing that can knock anyone's immune system out of whack is not getting enough sleep. And I know that boosting my immune system is really, really, really important. As a result of doing these things, my immune system actually didn't drop very much. And the second oncologist that I got, lovely lady that I got, actually, she allowed me to fly to Spain to run wellbeing retreats during chemo. And it was only as I was hearing things like this partway through my treatment that I realized what I was doing was very different. And what was happening with me was different. I was the only patient she would ever let near a plane. And I'm not some Amazonian woman. Let me tell you, I have the lowest pain threshold on the planet. I was the one that was always ill, always had everything that my son had. I'm not that person that can just power through everything. I'm not. So my being the person that was allowed to do these kind of things that were kind of different was starting to feel really unusual. So the oils mattered. The oils were helping boost my immune system, but also really support my sleep and keep my anxiety in a way that I could manage going to appointments, waiting for scans, waiting for scan results, and using them to support my emotions. The oils can work on a very physical level. I was using them to gargle with, so I never once got an issue with my mouth or my throat. My digestive system needed a bit of extra help. They work very physically, but they also work on an emotional and energetic level as well. The green cleaning, I use my oils for all of that. That's something that, again, I wasn't going to have anything else in the house. And think going through cancer treatment, keeping our immune system boosted, we don't want to be upping and upping and upping the chemicals, because they actually really impact your immune system in a negative way. So if we're upping the cleaning, then actually I'm just going to up the cleaning with things that aren't harmful to me, that I'm not absorbing through my skin, that I'm not breathing in, neither is anyone else. I work with oils and supplements to support inflammation, to support my energy levels, and to support any pain, any discomfort that I was in. That was the oils. The supplements, boosting immune health, really working on my gut health, looking at digestive enzymes. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. Prebiotics, chemotherapy, and many of the therapies, excuse me, really affect our health and our digestive system, and it can get very sensitive and it can get very reactive. So I knew, and also that it can be clearing out all the good bacteria. And we know, I hope you know, about the major connection between your gut health and your mental ability. So cognitive function, memory, all the things that, I don't know about you, but my goodness, the chemo fog actually never lifted. As I went into medical menopause, then I was gifted the ongoing gift of things falling out of my brain and not remembering why I walked into a room. But the whole support with the gut health is really important. Looking at detox, and that is only pre and post treatment. Post surgery, using supplements to help support me with inflammation and also with supporting my skin, working with energy and cognitive function is massive. Like at every step, there isn't anything here that isn't also something that can support not just mental health from an emotional perspective, but also it actually working. Having a brain that works is always great. I don't recognize mine quite so much anymore. However, I am dedicated to working with it and using all the things and finding things that help it work better. So oxygen therapy, also called HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And you may or may not know that actually many charities have these tanks, oxygen tanks. I'm in Leicestershire, and in Leicestershire we have multiple sclerosis society, and the MS societies are often places that have these. If you Google HBOT, you may see people like Justin Bieber in a personal pod. Like, it looks really scientific, it looks really like futuristic, and it's like laid down in an individual pod. They're usually in private clinics that you pay a lot for. Not the same experience as using them when you're in one of the tanks where there's multiple people. It's very cozy. You might be able to see just behind my head in that picture that the seats were like old coach seats, like properly old coach seats, the seats that you sat on to go on a school trip back in the day, those seats in there. But it's lovely. The people were wonderful, super, super supportive. Why go for oxygen when we can just breathe it? It's at pressure. So there's lots of research and lots of studies. In a hyperbaric oxygen tank, it's pure oxygen, and you're at pressure like a deep sea diver. And actually the tanks are like little mini submarines. Many places provide it. It's definitely worth looking if there's one in your local area, and look at the MS Society, see if they've got one. And they are really very inexpensive. The reason I started with this is, and also it kind of proved my point, that when I was going in here, one of the perks was that when I was here, I was often surrounded by the local Leicester Tigers players, or any of the football or rugby players that were injured. They were also there, very lovely to chat to, hard to talk with an oxygen mask on. One of the perks of being surrounded by incredible athletes and being able to talk to them, they were in there because they understand, and their coach and their trainers understand how healing it is for your body, for your bones, how regenerative it is to be at pressure breathing this oxygen. It's not there just, and if you heard me mentioning, it's in the MS Society. So they also really, really understand how supportive that is for the human body when the human body is under duress. So it's not only great for you, but you remember there's my brain going, the podcast that I shared at the beginning, that if you're, whether or not you're choosing to have chemotherapy, but if you've chosen or are choosing to have chemotherapy, is that oxygen therapy, along with being in ketosis and all of that together, can increase the efficacy of chemo. I wanted anything that was going to increase the efficacy of anything. I was up for it. So I used to go here. I went most days to have this. Oxygen also, I'm also into, well, if you can't get to an oxygen therapy centre, then look into Wim Hof and look into breath work, look into cold therapy. I have just had for my birthday this week, so I've always loved swimming. I've been an open water swimmer for a very long time. It wasn't something I felt able to do while I was on treatment because I was a bit dizzy, and post surgeries because I lost the use of my shoulders for a while. But I love getting in cold water, and I've just had for my birthday a cold pod in my garden, so I've been literally icing myself every day, and it feels amazing. Combined with the breath work, does so much for your nervous system, massively supports your immune system. You're going to hear some similarities here as we go. I'm going to keep talking about the same things. All of these things add up. So finding your oxygen therapy center, or actually intentionally going on YouTube, finding Wim Hof and learning that breath work that he teaches and doing breath holds, you'll see there are so many benefits for you. It's not just about breathing oxygen, it's about all of the impact that the breathing and the breath hold. And if you want to combine it with the cold, you just amplify it. I was available for all of it. I'm going to do all of them. And I did. If you don't feel that's possible, walking among trees and vegetation as early as you possibly can is the next best thing. Most people believe that the light wakes the birds, and it isn't the light, it's the oxygen released by the trees and the vegetation. So if you want to increase the quality of air you're breathing and how much you're breathing, walk in the woods, forest bathe, take in everything from nature, because that also really is supportive for our mental health, of wondering what the hell is happening, what has happened, trying to deal with some of that trauma as well. Immersing yourself in nature, listening, noticing, breathing is the next best thing. Okay, nutrition. This is the bit that gets a bit contentious. There are lots of different ways for you to fuel your body. There are lots of ways that are real common approaches that I would say at least start there, which is don't eat processed food. Don't eat it. Don't eat processed food. Make it. Just make it. Buy food that is as close to being out of the ground or from the farm as you possibly can. From the farm, if they are grass-fed animals that aren't put through a load of stress, even better. We don't need to eat someone else's stress. We've got enough of our own. Sugar is also a really contentious issue. When we talk about sugar, we're talking mostly about processed sugar, but I'll be honest, I also reduced a lot of the fruit I was eating. I was juicing, I juice vegetables, I drink garden, I drink green juices, and they taste like garden. You can make them more palatable, adding a little bit of pineapple, because it also has amylase in, which is great for you and great for those amino acids are great for your mouth. Your mouth gets sore. But actually processed foods and sugar, the conversation comes together because the processed foods are generally full of sugar. Please read every packet. I had a really awful experience this week where I was at a fresh fruit and veg shop that was outside where I'd been, knew I needed things, and I was rushing. Never a good thing when you're shopping, but I was like, it's as good as they've got raw beetroot. That's good for me, like raw, fresh fruit and veg. And I picked up, it did hurt me that it was in a plastic packet, because I'm also not a fan of plastic, but it was in a plastic packet and it was sweet corn on the cob. Didn't think any more of it. I was like, I'm amazing. Look at me, what a great mummy I am and wife, because I'm like coming home with all the stuff anyway. And then I could get juicing and get some food prepared. However, felt a bit squishy, this corn on the cob. And then I looked at it. It was ready cooked. Who needs someone else to cook corn on the cob for them? I don't get it. I can understand if it's a really fancy meal and it comes in a packet because you don't know how to make lasagna other than learn, and I get it, and all the boxes on it are red. But it was corn on the cob and it was ready cooked. I don't know who can't boil corn on the cob, but anyway, somebody somewhere, and not me. And something made me turn the packet over and look at the label. There were 5 ingredients. There were 5 ingredients. It was corn on the cob. And I went into my son, because I also believe we should advocate into our homes and to the people around us. And I showed him and I said, what do you think is the ingredient on this? And he was like, you're nuts. Corn. Clearly, corn. It's corn. I said, yeah, but there's 5 ingredients. Can't believe it. It drives me crackers. I'm going on a tangent, I know. There were 5 ingredients on that one corn on the cob. There shouldn't be any ingredients other than corn. So please be mindful of what you're eating, because none of it is doing you any good unless, and that now, like, who can we trust? I don't know. So, which is why I make my own juices, because I don't want anything in there other than, and most of my own food, because I don't want anything in there that I don't know what's there. And even now, talking about fruit and veg, we don't even know where they've been grown. We don't know what they've been sprayed with. Wash everything, even if it's labeled organic. Go and research the Dirty Dozen, and if you can buy organic, buy those, or at least the ones you eat the most of the Dirty Dozen. Even when it comes as organic, I want you to get apple cider vinegar, also amazing for your hair, by the way, and amazing as a prebiotic. Have a little drink of it before your meals. So many uses, along with white vinegar, but we're not doing that. It's wash your fruit and veg in apple cider vinegar, a little bicarb of soda. If you've got lemon oil, then lemon oil as well is really cleansing. The ketogenic diet, there are loads of ways to eat well. Just eat whole foods as close to the ground or the animal as possible, with the least amount of man's made interference. Ketogenic is eating meat or fish or fowl, salad and veg, and that's it. And I absolutely thrived on it. I started this way of living and eating before my treatment started, and I was already visibly thriving. You think before I'd been quite stressed, I was doing all the things. I had more compliments in that period of time than I've had in a long time, but people didn't know I'd had a cancer diagnosis. From a nutritional perspective, we want to be looking at things that are anti-inflammatory. And the place that fasting comes in is because I already knew that fasting was really beneficial for your gut health, to give it a break. You fast every day without realizing it. If you ever skip breakfast, you fasted. Going from dinner, not eating any snacks, and then having breakfast is fasting. Fasting, excuse me, hiccup. Fasting is something that can work really well for some people. Fasting is something that also doesn't work for other people because actually, if they feel nauseous, they need to eat. It's working with what works for you. This worked for me. And I also loved that mind-body connection between understanding being keto and testing my blood, understanding the fasting, and knowing that although I'd agreed to have chemotherapy, which I wasn't ever going to do, was that I was helping it do its job. Okay, emotional support was the next thing of the 7 columns. Being mindful of which people were around me, being mindful of the environments I put myself in, being mindful of the self-care I implemented and the tools that I was using to keep me calm, looking at everything being inflammatory, including conversations, including things I was exposed to, things that weren't going to be triggering to me. Really, really tapping into incredible support from amazing charities just like this one. Working with my oils, energy work, and really being connected to my why, that doing all of this and more was working. And that was keep reminding myself of all of the benefits of the things I was doing. So the other page. So chemotherapy. Yes, I did eventually agree to have chemotherapy, and I needed to switch my mindset around it, which was seeing it as positive rather than seeing it as something that was awful and I was going to be taken and kicking and screaming. It was never going to happen that way. And also working on an anti-inflammatory perspective, there's no point me going to chemotherapy appointments, feeling anxious, kicking and screaming, being in resistance. That creates inflammation in the body. So I needed to see it in the most positive way. And you know what really helped? What really helped was the environment I was in. I met some incredible women in there, met some incredible nurses that are absolute earth angels, and actually noticing and understanding and learning a lot more about chemotherapy and how it worked. Made me get to the point of I wasn't in resistance anymore, listening to incredible meditations all the time that were about the positive outcomes of chemotherapy. The hair conversation, as we started at the beginning, hair's a big thing for many people. And I also needed to flip that. Having a 5-year-old, I didn't want my son to go through the trauma of my being upset at my hair falling out. So I did choose to shave it before it fell out. I actually had a bit of a gathering at my house. It wasn't a party, it was a celebration of making empowered choices. And I had people come round, and I really recommend that people don't live through the hair loss thing. Don't need to add any more trauma to our world. So I was able to donate my hair to the Princess Trust, and I raised just over £2,000 for the Divine Charity. There's a charity that I support in Kenya. Chemotherapy brings so many side effects, including the fatigue. So I was working every day, and all the things I was doing, like juicing, which I'll talk about, that creates energy in your body when you just don't have any. Something that I didn't realize right up until the point when I had this conversation with a nurse, when I got admitted right at my last chemotherapy, there was a flurry of excitement, a bit like, you know, if you're on a plane and you know you're watching the air stewardesses, and if they're still moving around, we're good, even if the plane's bumping around a bit. But if they sit down and harness themselves in, then we maybe have a bit of a worry. This happened in the hospital with the nurses. The nurses were running around and they were whispering, and I called one over, saying, "You're making me nervous." I'd had a bit of a cough. It was like after my last chemotherapy. I'd had a bit of a cough. They wanted to keep me in just to do some odds. So what she shared with me was, "We're just looking for your notes. We can't find them." "What notes?" "Well, the notes from all your previous admissions." I haven't had, and this lady called off the search, brought the nurses over, and they were really surprised that I hadn't been admitted prior to that point, having 8 chemotherapies. And I didn't know until that moment that that was unusual. And they literally were gobsmacked. And that was a real moment for me, and that I'll always remember, of what I'm doing is different. What's happening here is different. What do you mean I shouldn't? Most people are normally brought in or admitted in between each treatment because of our being susceptible to septicemia, everything else. So I needed to take a breath, and she said, "How have you done that?" And I said, "Well, there's these oils," because that was what I was doing. "There's these oils, and I'm juicing, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing hyperbaric oxygen," and none of them had heard of any of it. Which brings me on to juicing. Juicing works at a cellular level. Juicing is also a way that you can consume incredible amounts of nutrients without needing to stand up for a long time and cook, which sometimes I didn't feel I was able to do. And also to be able to batch make them and have them in the freezer. They're really cooling for your mouth if you get issues with your mouth when you're going through treatment. And didn't always use them as meal replacements at all, actually. They were just boosting me and boosting my energy and boosting everything and the way that I felt every single time I had one of these juices. They are not full of fruit. That would make a sugar bomb, and that would be opposite of what I wanted to do. I was literally juicing vegetables with some apple lemon, and sometimes I would treat myself to some pineapple because I wanted all the good stuff. The other great thing about juicing is it is removing the solid fiber, but there is soluble fiber still present. But the solid fiber being removed means all of those nutrients are more bioavailable, and they're bioavailable much faster than having to take solid food all the way through your digestive system. And that for me was what I needed. And it was something that I could do every weekend, fill up my freezer and have something. I just had to remember to take them out every night, which didn't always happen, and I needed reminders everywhere to do it. So juicing is something that is massively, massively beneficial. You don't have to go very far and to look into juicing and to look into people like Jason Vale to understand how powerful juicing can be for supporting your body at a cellular level and gifting you energy. And then the last one of my 7, I know there's green living there on the end, but the last one of the 7 was surgery. I have had a bit of a dance with the whole surgery thing. So I knew straight away I wanted to have a double mastectomy. I knew also that I didn't want to have implants. However, I had no idea 5 years ago that this was going to be, and still ongoing, lots of conversations, quite a lot of coercion, and some fights to get the surgery that I wanted. In the UK, you might not know this, the UK is the only country where women with breast cancer, if they want to actually have a mastectomy or have the other of non-affected breast removed to be even, so they don't have issues with their back and their hips, etc. The UK is the only country where we have to have psychoanalysis to have a healthy breast removed. Which is a bit ridiculous, considering you don't need a psychoanalysis to have a foreign body put in, which is a silicone implant that also can create lots of ongoing issues. Never understood it, but it's something that is part of our system. I've had 6 surgeries so far because the first ones were done with such a bad result. They were done so badly that I've had to continue to have surgeries to put them right. The last one was in December. The next one should be in June, but I'm putting it off till the winter because I don't want it to interrupt my summer. There are so many options. I know that I come at this from breast cancer conversations, and there are so many options around surgery. And wherever you're at with whatever surgery is being proposed, please make sure you always know all of the options and not just the ones that you're being told by that particular person. Getting second and third opinions is always a really great idea. So I obviously come from a very specific view around breast cancer surgeries, and there are multiple options. I knew exactly which one I wanted right from the get-go, but it took me 3 years to get there. And then ongoing after that, it's not always easy and there's always a bumpy path. But a lot of the work that I do to support myself, my emotions, my resilience has meant that I know that I ended up with, again, had to change surgeons. I've got the right surgeon in the end, and I will have the outcome that I want so that I have the quality of life that I want. And then green living. So the surgery is the last of the 7 columns, but green living is just an overarching comment that I want to make around understanding the importance of shifting some of the things that are maybe in your world, on your skin, the people that are around you, the noise that you let into your life, thinking about home, how much you're exposed to Wi-Fi, and also how busy your calendar is. To be able to sort of detox all of that and apply some life laundry is always going to be super supportive for you. So a little focus on gut health, because there was quite a lot there. I want you to really understand the benefits of digestive enzymes and probiotics, no matter where you're at. No matter where you're at, every single human body needs to understand the importance of having enzymes. Most of this as well is because we don't get the enzymes that we need out of the food that we eat because the soils don't have the things that we need them to have, and lots of stuff is added onto your food, lots of sprays, lots of things that may not be washed off. Enzymes can support you with pain and joint stiffness. So anyone that's also been in the world of menopause, medical menopause, anything like that, where you have hormone imbalance for a reason, or even just pain and joint stiffness anyway, that starting with your gut is always a really, really good idea. Enzymes can also promote speeding up wound healing and recovery after surgery, support muscle soreness. Bromelain has massive benefits, and there are enzyme supplements that you can get. Certain digestive enzymes are present naturally in foods like bananas and pineapple. I talked about pineapple and bananas have amylase. Amylase is something that can really help the mouth if you get a sore mouth, depending on what medication you're having. Other foods that are rich in enzymes, kiwis, pineapples, papaya, fermented foods. I love bananas, eat them all the time. I quite like pineapple, but don't eat it all the time. So I don't want to have that fluctuation. I literally take it in a supplement before every meal. So it's there, along with prebiotics. Antibiotics strip the gut of good bacteria, and these are your friend, and these help you have a really smooth running, regularly running, supportive digestive system that isn't only supporting every organ of your body, but it's massively supporting your brain. So all the things you can possibly do to turn up the dial to help your gut, whether or not you're on medication, but especially if you are, we know that we have antibiotics administered many, many times, and this is something that you can actively be replacing, and supporting, whether it's just through natural foods or whether it's through supplementation. So hair, we touched on that a little bit. It was the worst time, and it was the hardest decision for me to have chemotherapy. I'll be honest, I wasn't having it for quite a while until I was. And I had my friends come round and cut my hair and donate it. And actually, after having a whole head of curly hair to deal with all the time and the time it took, I did actually find, knowing the way that I was looking after myself and knowing it would grow back, and it would grow back quickly and healthily and really well because of the way I supported myself, I actually really, really enjoyed the time that I got back. Like, actually took me no time at all to get ready to go out. What I feel that we don't get shown enough and we don't get told enough is that you can thrive. You can thrive through treatments. You can thrive through wherever you're at, whatever stage you're at. Maybe not all day, every day, but there are definitely times and places where if you're mindful of your energy and you're mindful of what you're doing and mindful of who's around you and the support you're doing and how you can support yourself, that there are times that you can absolutely find the joy. And these are just some examples. It doesn't mean there weren't any hard times. The thing that I realized was I didn't see this enough. I didn't see or hear enough talk of people doing well through their treatment, of shining through their treatment. I felt like I was only told all the awful stories and all the things and all the hospitalizations and all of the risks and all of the really heavy stuff. So I started sharing what I was doing right at the beginning because I wanted other women, other people to see that it could be done differently. It wasn't challenge free. Medical menopause, I was slammed into a brick wall of medical menopause after chemo 1. And I then had sleep issues again. I then was having hot flushes every 45 minutes. I had chemo acne. There wasn't anything that I didn't already have at home that I could support. And that was really empowering for me and can be empowering for everyone else, knowing you don't have to wait for someone else or wait for yet another medication that may well then need another medication for you to use against the side effects. All of the things that I've used were side effects free. And in fact, one of the biggest shocks I got from chemotherapy was them giving me a bag full of stuff to take home to also take. And the majority of it, I gave them back because I had natural solutions at home for supporting my digestive system, for supporting my skin, for supporting the hot flushes, all of those things. I knew if I started taking medication, there was going to be medication for the side effect of that medication. And I didn't want to keep adding it all up and adding up more things. So I was able to turn to things that I already had and were already in place at home. This is one of the things, this is one of my most shared, most used recipes for anyone that ever has sore throat ever, not necessarily medication induced or chemo induced, any tickle in your throat, any kind of issue with your throat. This is my absolute go-to and is the go-to for in all of the families that I support. This gargle recipe, and actually for chemotherapy, because it does affect all the fast producing cells like your nails and your throat and your mouth, digestive system, hair. This was something that I then just upped the ante, and I had this made up. And I had this, I could share this with you actually, Vicky, if you want to send this out on email to attendees, they can have the picture. Apple cider vinegar, to be honest, is just has a million one uses. On guard is an oil blend, oregano, add to a tumbler of water. And I was literally just gargling with it every time I walked past the bathroom, every time I needed the bathroom to keep those mouth sores and sore throat at bay. And I did. I actually only got one teeny tiny little ulcer right on the end of my tongue. Whereas I know that the mucositis was actually rife with everyone else that was on the same chemo plan as me. And people always ask me, how are you doing it? How does that happen? And yet when the medics ask me, when my doctors ask me, my oncologist used to say, here she is, as I walked in the door, bounced in the door, do you want to know what I'm doing? The answer was always no. So I decided to share it anyway. This is an amazing recipe that can really support everybody. I was able to thrive with all of the things I was doing. I was still working, I was running my business, I was hosting events, hosting oily hangouts, hosting webinars, hosting green cleaning classes and workshops, and I flew out to Spain twice to co-run that retreat. This is why I share this. This isn't necessarily the standard way that people are going through these kinds of treatments. And I want more people to know that there is more possible. And there's even more possible when you start to draw in some of the ways that you can support yourself at home. And actually, if nothing else, that's supporting that fire in yourself and the energy within yourself and the feeling a bit better because there's something you can reach for in the middle of the night. Is great. So on the 5th of September, so I started my treatment at the end of January, and then I finished my treatment, and then I had my first surgery, which was a mastectomy in August. And then the 5th of September, I had a phone call from my oncologist, which was that I'd had a complete pathological response, meaning there was no trace anymore. And that was an incredible day. And it was in a day that I didn't know was coming. And that's the thing of trying to support our emotions through all of this and not knowing at what point will that come? Will it ever come? And many of the clients that I support actually still don't know that or have been told it won't ever come. The thing that I think is the most important thing from a human perspective is keeping moving forward and being able to draw into our lives everything we can do to support our mind and support our emotions and support all the ways that our physical body needs supporting, reducing inflammation, boosting our immune system. Since completing my treatment, the next phase, well, the first thing was for me to get into Stony Cove with the Mermaid Tail, which is a local lake near us. There's got the most incredible water quality, one of the best water qualities in the country, actually, at Stony Cove. Teach my son how to ride a bike because I'd not been able to do that through that year when all of his other friends were riding a bike. I wasn't able to run after him with a bike. And some of the things that I dreamt of, which was actually hiring a camper van and going away and spending a weekend with my friends in a camper van. And then since completing all of that, I've worked every day on future proofing and dream building. It doesn't feel like work anymore. It feels like second nature. But coming out the other side of treatment, moving through such a lot of fear, grief, loneliness, multiple surgeries, massive issues with identity and figuring out where I fit back into my life. And in fact, I didn't really. So I had to create a new one. Phase 2, I call it the what the F phase of the what the F just happened, because we're in survival mode in phase 1 and we are getting through. And when we get to phase 2, it's kind of looking back going, I have no idea what just happened and I don't recognize myself anymore, or how I feel, or the fact that I've got anxieties popping up for no reason. I got back into my wetsuit, I got out on my paddleboard, and I needed to really take intentional action every day to keep myself grounded. I got the puppy I'd always dreamt of my entire life, never had an animal and always wanted a dog, and we got Pretzel to keep me moving so that I didn't seize up completely and spend all my time sat at a desk. And then phase 3, the living beyond the shadow of reoccurrence, and living beyond that every twinge is some form of cancer again. Living with many practices still present. So for me now, a lot of the things that I was doing then, I still do now, and they keep me A, sane, B, moving, and not seized up in a sitting down shape. And there are new ones. There are new ones that I found ever since, like my cold pod and getting in that every morning or every evening if I haven't been in it, and supporting the brain fog, supporting the cognitive function, being able to function as a real human being that doesn't forget everything every 5 seconds, that is so frustrating and used to make me so angry, and actually completely exacerbate everyone around me. And that's the other part of phase 2 and 3, when everyone else around you is ready to be like, we'll just crack on now like it never happened. No, it did. And that whole conversation is another bigger conversation, but it's one that can create a lot of emotions for everybody involved. And we don't ever go through this in a vacuum. We go through this with our friends and with our family. So understanding the phase 2 and phase 3 part is really important from an emotional support perspective, which is something that I do offer a lot of support with. So that's what I do. I run courses, I work one-to-one for phase 1, 2 and 3, 7 columns of cancer care, life laundry, and they're basically helping people clear out the crap out of their homes and replace them with stuff that supports them. Workshops, which I'm hoping I'm going to be coming back with. Vicky and I are going to have a chat about some of the workshops that I can return with and run online, whether they be on menopause or sleep or life laundry, green cleaning. But the one thing, if nothing else, that you take away from today is about empowered choices equal empowered living, no matter where you're at, no matter which part of the journey you're on. Empowered choices will always lead to empowered living right where you are. So thank you so much. I'm going to take some questions. There are some contact details on here if anybody needs them, if they want to have an individual conversation, then that's something we can do. But what I would also like to share is that for those attending today, or for members of the Cancer Support Network, is to offer a free complimentary session to find out more about how you can feel more empowered in your life.